is Father Bogdan Bucur, and he had answer to us, for this invitation. We have to thank him for taking his time and coming and spending with us. I hope you're gonna really take notes and use them.
I teach at Duquesne University, which is a Catholic university in Pittsburgh, and on weekends I commute an hour north of Pittsburgh in a small Antiochian parish in Butler, PA. And that's not really how I make my living. I'm just teaching. I teach Bible mostly, and so there's no disagreement there. I studied patristics, which is the writings of the Holy Fathers, so what came a few centuries after the Bible, after the New Testament. Since there were no jobs and openings in patristics, I migrated towards Bible, and I was fortunate, God's providence really, to get this job. There's another Romanian priest who's going to be here at some point, Father Radu Bordeanu. There is something that I've experienced in a similar camp organized by the Antiochians at the Antiochian village in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. They have something called Ask Abuna. Abuna in Arabic means father. Ask Abuna just because it's an alliteration. It's two words with the same letter, but just call it Stump the Priest. And we can do that. You can fire questions on literally any kind of topic without hesitations, and just stump the priest, and if you can. I'll try, of course, not to be stumped, but it's a good way of breaking the ice. We can do this whenever possible. Alternatively, I have a few printouts with biblical texts, and I was thinking, since I spoke a little bit about icons, so I could expand a bit on that. And you're familiar with the story of Adam and Eve, I'm sure. Well, we could read that again, and I'll try to stump you a little bit, and then find something about icons there.
Are we supposed to? Because there's so many versions, and I never know which one's safe to read.
In English, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, frankly, I wouldn't worry too much. Just pick one version that you can understand. I've chosen the NRSV. I'm not very happy with this choice, actually, but it's one of the versions that are used very often in academia, and so for me it's a lot easier because I don't have to change from one or the other. It has some problems with it. They try to use inclusive language. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work. Some things ought not to be rendered they when it's he. Sometimes it's really important that you identify who it is about. But sometimes inclusive language works. The problem is that NRSV is not a very theological translation. So very often you have verses that don't work. For instance, in the book of Genesis, host, hostes in Latin, means oaste, oști in Romanian. It means armies. So the angelic hosts are the angelic armies. Because in ancient Israel, they thought about God as the commander-in-chief of angelic armies. And the angelic armies, if you remember, are the way they picture the functioning of the Holy Ghost. It's orderly, it's hierarchical, and God issues commands which are carried out by the angelic armies. So that is why we read hosts. Well, the King James and most translations, unfortunately, preserve host as a word, even though we no longer understand it. If they were to switch it from hosts to armies, things would be so much clearer.
But it's important that they are of peace and not of war.
Exactly, yeah, that's a very, very good point. Otherwise, we'd have a very funny way of looking at God as a bully in chief, and that wouldn't really be what we mean. So, King James has this problem that some of the verb forms are difficult. I mean, it's really difficult to it doesn't really roll off the tongue. So find a version that is understandable. That's the most important thing.
Are there different Orthodox study Bibles, or there's only one?
For America there is one, and I'm afraid I don't know that there is anything similar in Romania. There is a translation made by His Eminence the late Madron Bartolomeo Anania of Cluj, which has interesting footnotes. It's not quite a study Bible. That's not really an Orthodox tradition to have study Bibles, but it's useful. So we don't really have a study Bible in Romanian. So, as I said, it's not the ideal product, but it'll guide you very well. It has references to liturgy, references to hymns, references to liturgical usage, interpretations of the fathers in the footnotes. It has icons here and there that do relate to the text that's read. So it would be a good purchase if you made it.
Wait, so what version is it?
It's called the Orthodox Study Bible.
Okay.
And
I've seen it on Amazon.
Yes, so ask for it and you'll find it.
So
You can't find a used copy. I mean, Orthodox usually buy it and use it. They don't resell it.
And keep it.
Keep it, yes.
It's the best one for the Orthodox.
And in Romanian, it's a lot better actually, because the Romanian church, unlike the Greek church or the Russian church or Serbian church or Bulgarian church, they have started to adapt to the language of the people. Already, gradually moved off of the ancient languages since the 16th century, and gradually worked towards renderings of the scriptures in the spoken language of the people. So the tradition in the Romanian church has been to adapt the translations to the spoken language. This is why we have plenty of translations. So in the 20th century, several have been undertaken, and to my taste, the most beautiful one, and the one if you want to practice your Romanian also, would be the one translated by Bartolomeo Anania. It's very, very beautiful. He was a poet also, so he really had a gift with languages. And the Old Testament portion is translated from the Septuagint, from the Greek text. It's not always the case, but that's a beautiful one. So I hope I've answered.
Yes, thank you.
So that's a good, by the way, this is the kind of stuff the priest I was thinking of. But of course the questions could be completely unrelated, such as which translation of the Bible should we use, and do you believe in life on Mars, and can we harvest organs, and why is the religion so long, or, I mean, really any kind of question. I'll take this out. So, let me just read a couple of verses from the first chapter. We read now from the book of Genesis. It's the first book of the Bible. And Romanian it's called Da Faceri. So you get the point of what this book is about. It's the book of beginnings and of things being made from scratch. Genesis. In verse 26 of this first chapter, after God has created everything, it says, "Then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it." And now I'd skip to the second chapter, chapter 2 of Genesis. And could we just start reading one verse at a time with verse 5? So I'll start off and then, what's your name? Clara. Right. "When no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no one to till the ground.
But a stream would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the ground. And the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being.
And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, and the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And
Now
for
skip
food-
to verse 15.
Sorry.